This is what R. Nelson Nash would say is probably the most devastating human problem that we have to confront, which is the arrival syndrome. That feeling, that idea, that sentiment that we know all that there is to know. Hello and welcome to the Durham Talents channel. My name is Jesse Durham. Today we are back in our book review of R. Nelson Nash's book, Becoming Your Own Banker, Unlocking the Infinite Banking Concept. We are in part 2, where we are going over the human problems we've already covered: Parkinson's Law, Willie Sutton's Law, the Golden Rule. We've now arrived at the arrival syndrome. And again, the arrival syndrome is simply thinking that we know all that there is to know. Nash would describe this particular human problem as probably the most devastating of the human, and we still have some to go yet, which is interesting. But he would say that, and it's not even the first one, again, which is interesting. When you read the order in the book, we're on the fourth one. Be that as it may, he said it's probably the most devastating one. It's the most difficult to confront, and I believe with honest introspection that we could arrive at that same thinking, because that's exactly what has to happen. We have to evaluate our thinking. We have to recognize that we all, and I did, from the very first time that I picked up Becoming Your Own Banker back in 2015, I had and carried with me preconceived ideas, experience, real life experience, and you have real life experience. We have opinions, we have thoughts, we may have prejudices, all these different things that make up us have to be dealt with if, and again, this is if we're looking to successfully implement the infinite banking concept, which is becoming our own banker. We have to address Parkinson's, the idea that work expands to meet the time envelope given, or that expenses tend to expand to equal or even surpass income. Willie Sutton's Law, the idea that where wealth is, there are those who would illegally or legally seek to separate us from our money. We have to confront the Golden Rule. He who has the gold makes the rules. The idea of well capitalizing ourselves. And then, of course, now the arrival syndrome. Being able to recognize that we don't know it all. And there are so many sayings, and I'll share a few of these. And you can let me know in the comments section, if you're listening to this video, watching this video, the sayings that you've grown up with, that you've acquired in your business background, life background, what have you. So when I think of the arrival syndrome, I can't help but have these competing thoughts in my mind of, I hear from, I guess, grade school age, the idea of a know-it-all. Now, we all probably have an idea of what we think about a know-it-all. Whether we were the know-it-all, wanted to be the know-it-all, we're sure we were not the know-it-all. And it's great to be knowledgeable. It's great to be wise. It's great to be informed. I don't think anybody's walking around saying, I wish I were less informed. I wish I were not so wise. I mean, that would actually be a sign of the opposite, probably, right? That you are not very wise, or at least not humble about it. But the idea of a know-it-all can imply an annoyingly bothersome know-it-all, a person who uses that knowledge, in an annoying fashion. Be that as it may, that's one of my thoughts from grade school, a know-it-all. And we hear these. I thought I was getting ready to leave that thought, but we have these, and you can listen. I'm open to examination. I'm open to admonishment. I must declare that I certainly have not arrived. I feel strongly about many things, and I don't mind both standing strongly on the things that I am convinced of, that I am persuaded of in many different facets of life. And I know we're particularly on this subject of the book review. Be that as it may, I do feel strongly about very many things, and I also am not convinced about many more things. So I'm saying I know that there are voices in and around us. What Nash would call the noise, okay? People that are representing ideas or thoughts, maybe misrepresenting. There's misinformation out there, just like there is information out there in the wide world. All that to say, from grade school, I knew about know-it-alls, heard about know-it-alls. Might have been one every now and then, probably not too often. I wasn't necessarily the sharpest tool in the shed. In every instance of life, sure, I had my highlights like you probably have yours. Everyone has their gifts. But later on in life, I also have some other thoughts about the arrival syndrome that I gathered from business seminars, for example. That was probably the first time when I started my own business after having been in high school education as a Spanish teacher, having been in law enforcement for several years, and then I ventured out on my own doing business for myself, and I started hearing these concepts like those from business seminars where folks like Ray Kroc would be quoted as saying, if you're green, you're growing. If you're ripe, you're rotten. I heard folks say things like, what I know could fill a thimble, and what I don't know could fill a dump truck. So things of that nature where I started getting around open-minded folks who were actively seeking to develop themselves, to grow themselves, to expand their knowledge, to enhance their skills and whatever it was that they were doing. They were just open to personal growth and development, open to the idea that what I know could fill a thimble, what I don't know could fill a dump truck. So this idea of the arrival syndrome just happened to strike me because I probably started attending business seminars starting back in 2015 as well, the very same year, but earlier in the year than I read the book. I am certain of that. I remember these things distinctly. They're still very, very impactful to me. So I began attending business seminars, personal growth and development seminars in early 2015 at the start of the year. Read the book halfway through the year, 2015. So my soil had been tilled, is what I'm saying. I was open to the idea of Nash saying, we've got to combat, we've got to confront, we've got to deal with the arrival syndrome. That made sense to me at that time. I said, well, of course you do. Of course we've got to evaluate the arrival syndrome in this particular area to prepare ourselves to move in the direction to become our own banker. We have to question, we have to validate, we have to re-ascertain facts, information, misinformation, prejudices, preconceptions. We have to question our thinking. Then, to even begin this exercise of considering becoming your own banker, just reading the book, vetting the idea, the concept of, can you become your own banker? What is an insurance company? What is a bank? What does an insurance company do? What does a bank do? What is this banking function? All these different things that are in Nelson's book, of course. Being open to question everything. And now that's probably a philosophy that I may even say a good bit here on the channel. I'll certainly say it to our children. I encourage their questions. It's a great thing. Scripture even says you have not because you ask not. There's nothing wrong with asking good questions about important things. So here we are doing a study, a book review on R. Nelson Nash's book. We know what the arrival syndrome is. It's the idea of, well, I know that, or I'm already doing that. I know everything. Let me introduce you to someone that I was introduced because of Nelson's book, and that's going to be Mr. Ed Deming. Now, you can find information and resources about Mr. Ed Deming. Actually, you can look him up online. You can see video recordings of interviews and such. He has written works out there, again, that I highly encourage you to check out for yourself. And he's an interesting person to consider with this human problem in particular, the arrival syndrome, because he was a business consultant, and I believe he lived from 1900 to 1993. And he was a business consultant and I believe this was right after World War II, when he was coming to American companies saying, listen, let's have a focus on quality. Quality is going to be this vanguard concept when you look into his material, or you get to hear him speak anywhere, these recordings now. Quality. So he's coming to a post-World War II American economy, American business scene, saying, let's focus on quality. And he was given this cursory knee-jerk response of, oh, well, we're doing that. We're already doing that. We know that. And he didn't have any headway with these American companies that were thinking they knew it all, that they were doing it all. And what he did was he actually went to Japan and began teaching his ideas there about quality. Now, there are some things to realize here, and Nash talks about this in his book, where he's discussing what he called his 14 points. So he had these 14 points that he said were interdependent. And I'm not going to go into those. Nash doesn't. Again, Nash highly encourages a lot of supplemental reading. I do as well. That's why I've been watching and learning more, of course, over the years about Ed Deming myself. So he had these 14 points that were interdependent, meaning they relied and built one upon the other. And he was trying to share these to help American businesses after this post-World War II scene that we were in. And he was disregarded. He was disregarded. Now, here was Japan looking to rebound from World War II economically as well, and they latched on to his concepts. And then, of course, years and years later, Mr. Ed Deming did get the recognition for what he had accomplished in Japan by teaching his principles about quality, and how incredibly that helped the Japanese nation to rebound from that post-war situation. And he was given all kinds of attention and notoriety. But again, the idea that you know it all, well, doesn't that just naturally and inherently then shut off? I like how, again, I guess going back to some business seminars and other books, Robert Kiyosaki comes to mind. Robert Kiyosaki made me reevaluate the word how a lot. And again, I couldn't help but read R. Nelson Nash's book, Becoming Your Own Banker, thinking about how when it came to the arrival syndrome. Sure, it's great to ask the other questions. What is this? Where is this happening? But the idea of how, when we ask a how question, like Robert Kiyosaki will say, well, how can I afford to do this thing that I want to? How? So by asking how questions, we're asking a very open-ended kind of a question. So when it comes to accomplishing a goal, pursuing a prerogative, asking how questions keeps us open-minded, instead of us saying, well, I already know that. I already do that. So it's a terribly interesting example from history, which is just not so very long ago. And of course, Nash felt the impulse to include Ed Deming's work and example in his book, and I think we should take note of it, and that's why it's worthy of discussion. Now, following on the example from Ed Deming, Nash references Daniel Boorstin, a historian who lived from 1914 to 2004, who said, the greatest obstacle to discovering the shape of the earth, the continents, and the oceans was not ignorance. It was the illusion of knowledge. Again, and he's talking about the discovering of the shape of the earth and continents and such, but it doesn't matter. That's just a particular subject matter. But again, the greatest obstacle was not ignorance. And ignorance is just simply not knowing. I am ignorant about many, 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 many subject matters. Many subject matters. Some I know a little on, some I know a lot on. You too. But on many, I am just simply ignorant, meaning I don't know. I've not read about it, don't have any experience, haven't spoken about it, may even be completely unaware of some subject matter out there where I most certainly am unaware of because I don't know everything, haven't arrived. Interesting thought. You don't know what you don't know. Have you heard that? Have you heard that? See, all these other sayings that I've acquired over the years, many of which you've probably heard, they come to me when I consider the arrival syndrome. You don't know what you don't know. Let me say that again, just in case you're hearing this for the first time like I did some years ago. You don't know what you don't know. You don't know what you don't know. And you're either open to knowing, you're willing to ask the question, well, how is that? Or you're not. And then that, like Robert Kiyosaki describes, that just shuts off the learning process. Ray Kroc, with his example, that's you rotting. R. Nelson Nash saying, you're not going to be successful. That's just before you ever get to implementing the infinite banking concept, before you ever get to being financially independent, building and employing your own private monetary system, just by dealing with the human problem of the arrival syndrome, you're cutting off your opportunities. So you don't know what you don't know. There's another saying that came to me while I was considering another one. I was actually getting ready to say another quote from Will Rogers. So Daniel Borson just said the greatest obstacle to discovering the shape of the earth, etc., was not ignorance. It was the illusion of knowledge. So let me throw a couple more sayings at you. Will Rogers said the problem in America isn't so much what we don't know. I might be getting this a little bit off. Bear with me. I'll put it up on a screen if you're watching this. But Will Rogers said something along the lines of, the problem in America isn't what people don't know. It's what they think they know that just ain't so. So again, they're that illusion of knowledge. Thinking that we have the answer. Thinking that we know what's going on. And then let me get to another, and I'm going right back to R. Nelson Nash on this one. He would say that most people's understanding of whole life insurance, which again, here we're talking about unlocking the infinite banking concept. So that means buying, owning, using properly structured whole life policies with mutual companies that pay dividends to become your own banker. So Nash would say, just talking about the product, not yet the process of infinite banking, but just the product of whole life insurance, he would say that most people's understanding of life insurance is based off of someone else's misunderstanding of life insurance. So I hope you're tracking along here with me. I think all these sayings are a great way of considering many different experiences from these different folks to consider confronting the same issue, which is thinking that we know it all or that we have arrived. I've not arrived. I'm open to learning. I'm so very grateful. I might not have said it well enough a moment ago. I'm so very grateful that I'd had all the different things that had happened in my life, career changes, growing family, turbulent market things happening, just all kinds of stuff that had me at a point where in 2015, I was open to reading a book that wasn't just a fun novel, that just wasn't a fun read, but something that was actually for personal growth, development, bettering myself. I'm just thankful and glad I was open to reading something like that. Because I mean, anybody that's been in school, it's possible, even for folks who naturally would like to read, it's kind of possible for you to get turned off from reading altogether after so much obligatory and forced reading of inferior information, inferior works that are out there. That's my thinking on it. So I am grateful that I was open to reading the book, grateful that I'm open to the opinions and experiences and influence, and at least for consideration. I'll keep what I want to keep. You'll keep what you want to keep. We can disregard what we want to disregard. But being open to consider something puts us in a completely different space than not even being willing to look at what Jocko Willink, for example, would call someone else's perspective. Being able to detach, get a different angle on the same situation, and have a new perspective of seeing what's going on, how is this happening, because we've detached, got a different perspective, and we're willing to look and consider and not say, well, this is the way it's always been done. Who hasn't heard that in their workplace? Or lots of other, the family, the workplace, lots of organizations, nonprofit, profit, doesn't matter. Who hasn't heard that? This is the way it's always been done. This is the way we're going to do it. I mean, there are many examples in history that are out there, but I guess one that jumped in my mind right there was thinking about British military personnel wearing bright red in ranks, marching straight ahead against American revolutionists that were ducking and covering, maneuvering, more guerrilla-like warfare. Okay. Just because it had always been done that way didn't mean that it was appropriate for that time, that place, that type of a conflict. But that worked out okay for us.
America.
Okay. So just because it's always been done a certain way doesn't mean it should stay that way always. Always is one of those words we have to be cognizant of. Again, if we want to make improvement, if we want to have success. Now, here's a quote from Nash himself. He said, as practitioners of teaching clients to develop their own banking systems, this is probably our hardest job. And what he was referencing was to get people to open up their minds and take on an in-depth look. And he went on to say to consider this as a business, to correctly classify things, etc. So Nash was saying the hardest thing for a practitioner, so this is for myself, I could say from my experience as well, for sure, this is the hardest job that I have, to get people to open their minds to take an in-depth look at something. Because again, we all carry these preconceived ideas. We all have to deal with the noise in the vast world that's out there of misinformation or sound bites that only show us one aspect of a greater whole. So I would say that's been my experience for sure, is getting folks to consider some aspect, some element of the laws that Nash mentions in his book, or the characters in the play. That's again another reference to how Nash would encourage us to look at becoming your own banker, the infinite banking concept. He would say you need to know who the characters are in the play. You need to know who and what and why and how these different characters are, do, etc. The commercial banks, government, you, money, capital, wealth, mutual life insurance companies, all these different characters, we need to know who they are. And to get someone to, really just to get out of that, what's often called hamster on a wheel mentality of, go to school, make good grades, go get a job, spouse, kids, home, busy, schedules, all these different things to get up and actually look at something in depth, not just, and that's an important part. I shouldn't have said that too quickly earlier. I'm glad we're talking about it still. That in-depth part of what he said. How important to you is your ability to control the banking function as it relates to your needs, nobody else's, your needs. How important is it to you to create intergenerational financial literacy and independence? How important is a legacy to you? How important is guarantees to you, control to you, compounding your efforts, compounding your money? How important are these things to you so that you will take an in-depth look at a really thin book? You know, often I will of course encourage prospective clients, and then of course still clients, to not just read Nash's book, but to reread his book. 8 years later, I'm still rereading Becoming Your Own Banker. I read it this past year. I'll read it again this year. I track that, all of my reading. But that book as well, still, we own multiple policies with multiple companies at this point. We've used our system of policies to finance many things in our life, and yet I still reread Nash's book, and I'm not doing that just for fun. Plus, I did it as a consumer. Let me point that out. I was reading and rereading Nash's book, even just as a consumer, before being a professional in this space teaching and coaching and mentoring other folks to become their own banker. I was still rereading his book and getting more out of it. I continued to have, and I hope that I will, I anticipate that I will continue to have aha moments on this journey of still becoming our own banker. Because I've not arrived, I'm open to reading and learning and studying. I mean, if you just made a workout of pursuing Nash's recommended readings beyond his own, you've got a lot of good work ahead of you to taking an in-depth look at this situation of who controls the banking function in your life. And if you've not arrived, and if you'll unplug out of the matrix, or if you'll step off of the hamster wheel for a moment, if you'll detach and get a different perspective and look at this situation differently, if you will question everything I'm saying. I'm saying you can become your own banker. How do you become your own banker? You learn things. You consider doing things differently. You consider who the characters are in the play. The emphasis is on you. I'm just here to help facilitate that, to speed up that learning process, to make myself accessible, to be able to share my experience, and to be able to help folks actually get on their way to becoming their own banker by writing policies for them. Be that as it may, the arrival syndrome is perhaps going to be the most arduous of these human problems to confront, and it will be very, very, very worthwhile. Remember, Nash would say, becoming your own banker is the most profitable thing that you could choose to do over your lifetime. And to be able to do it and do it successfully, we must confront the human problems, perhaps the hardest of which is the arrival syndrome. Again, because these sayings keep coming back to me for years. I heard from a good friend one particular saying time and time again, and that's fine. Leaders are repeaters. There's a saying before I give you this other saying. But he would say that the most dangerous words out there are, I know that. Again, he would say the most dangerous words out there are, I know that. Like when you first hear someone say something, or you're first presented with a situation or an idea or an opportunity or what have you, for you to just knee-jerk reaction reply, I know that. Again, that shuts off any forward development, any forward progress, because of that lack of open-mindedness. Again, even here, I'm not telling people what to think. I'm not telling you how to do things, but I'm certainly trying to prompt you to consider many things. One of which is, of course, that you have not arrived, like I have not arrived, and that iron can sharpen iron. And I'm looking to speed up learning curves and help people by pointing out, by prompting, by asking some good questions. I get that out of Scripture a lot. If you look at Jesus Christ, many, many times he would ask somebody, and Nash, I'm told, from folks that were really close to him, I'm told, would very often do that same thing. If he was asked a question, he would ask somebody a question back in trying to prompt them or point them towards the answer to their question, but not directly giving it, to encourage that continued thinking process. And there's a lot of value in that, I suppose, in a couple of aspects, just because then you're not necessarily throwing pearls before swine either, because you're giving more information back, even if it is in the form of a question, and all that does is just encourage more growth and development and consideration and labor. So again, the sayings are coming in fast and furious. Come, let us reason together. That's another one that comes to mind. Nash also mentions that Fortune magazine, its article on EVA, economic value added, that we have already addressed in other portions of this book review series. Again, he references that magazine article where Fortune magazine said, if you understand what's really happening, you'll know what to do. Again, I'm going to repeat that one because that is a very common saying that I do give Nash credit for and that I do use with clients and prospective clients. If you understand what's really happening, you'll know what to do. So again, that's where I find myself in the role of encouraging folks to consider things so that they'll be more aware of what's going on, so that you can make your informed decision based off of your due diligence, your learning and understanding, because you'll be the one that knows what to do. By being informed, by being aware, by understanding the characters and who they are in the play. And of course, all that is facilitated by a mind that has not arrived. So when you know what's going on, you'll know what to do. Next, Nash mentions, and we will as well, Sir Francis Drake's world circumnavigation prayer. Now, he was leaving from England. This was in 1577. And I don't know if I've said it yet, but we are looking at page 34 from Nash's book, if you want to have the book and be able to reference it and what we're covering here. We are on page 34 of the 5th edition. But he references Sir Francis Drake's prayer before he set out to be the first man to circumnavigate the world, leaving from Portsmouth, England, 1577. He said this: "Disturb us, O Lord, when we are too well pleased with ourselves, when our dreams have come true because we dreamed too little, when we arrived safely because we sailed too close to the shore. Disturb us, O Lord, when with the abundance of things we possess, we have lost our thirst for the waters of life. Having fallen in love with life, we have ceased to dream of eternity, and in our efforts to build a new earth, we have allowed our vision of the new heaven to dim. Disturb us, O Lord, to dare more boldly, to venture on wilder seas, where storms will show your mastery. Where losing sight of land, we shall find the stars. We ask you to push back the horizons of our hopes and to push us in the future in strength, courage, hope, and love. This we ask in the name of our captain, who is Jesus Christ." There's so much that I like right there, and that Sir Francis Drake put so eloquently, beautifully. We're too pleased with ourselves. Boy, if that doesn't speak to the arrival syndrome for sure. Pushing back our horizons, that concept right there. I mean, literally, this guy's getting ready to sail around the world. That was certainly expanding man's horizons at that point. Dreaming these ideas, dreaming too little. arriving too safely because we sailed too close. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. Sure. I mean, I'll be the first to talk about mitigating risk, loving the value of guarantees, etc. And yet, it's a concept, a very real concept as well, to have skin in the game. Ceasing to dream, allowing our vision to dim. Again, we've already heard Nash reference vision before. And again, I don't want to just dive too deep on this passage, but there's a lot here. Even the idea that's repeated 3 times of disturb us. He's not saying that in a bothersome way. He's saying, well, some people would say stir the pot in a different context as well. That might be an annoying type of disturbance, but disturb in a healthy way. I know that my children, let me put it to you this way. I know that my children can ask us some interesting questions. My wife and I, we could be driving down the road and any one of our children could ask us at face value a really simple question. And yet there's no telling where that could take us. And sometimes I may be taken a bit off guard by their frank questions, but it is good. That kind of disturbing is a good kind of disturbing, both for us to maintain open communications, for them to have, of course, confidence in being able to speak with us, lots of other things. But I'm saying that's a good form, a good example of disturbing to further information, disturbing to better information, disturbing to more understanding. So I love that Nash uses all these pieces of information from so many. I mean, what have we looked at? We've looked at a business consultant and his life experience and the things that he was teaching about quality. We've looked at what a historian said about the discovering of the earth and shape and continents and such, how that was hindered more by an illusion of knowledge than ignorance. We've looked at several quotes from Nash and his experience, of course, with working with folks, helping to point them towards considering becoming their own banker and what that led him to believe about the arrival syndrome being perhaps the most difficult of these human problems to confront. We've read from Fortune magazine, and now we've read a circumnavigation prayer where this man was making a trip around the world hundreds of years ago, and he's talking about things that are still so very relevant today in so many areas, in so many ways. But even in this particular area where folks are either still vetting this idea of, do I want to become my own banker? Or folks are already clients and they're just looking to take the deep dive and really understanding this concept, taking that in-depth look at things the way Nash just encouraged a moment ago. Really, really looking at the arrival syndrome, making some honest introspection in our lives to consider where we're at with that. And then, again, let me finish with the same passage that Nash finishes with. If you care to look, I will be going to Deuteronomy chapter 8, verse 17 and 18. And thou say in thine heart, my power and the might of mine hand hath gotten me this wealth. But thou shalt remember the Lord thy God, for it is he that giveth thee power to get wealth, that he may establish his covenant which he sware unto thy fathers, as it is this day. Now, when I consider that passage of Scripture, I also connect that with something else that Nash said in this passage, where he said that the arrival syndrome has probably limited more achievements in mankind than any other issue has. I think that scripture that we just read is reminding us both to give due regard to the Creator, which for the sake of this example is just an outside influence, if I could use it in that way. And again, I'm open to have more than just discussions about the infinite banking concept and to discuss R. Nelson Nash's book, Becoming Your Own Banker. If you want to have that kind of a discussion, I'm very, very, very enthusiastic about having that type of a discussion as well about our Creator or any of these verses that Nash references in Scripture and such. But when I was making my notes about covering this particular section of the book, I thought about my health journey. And when I say my health journey for me, I guess I was active as a child. I did sports in school. I did extracurriculars through college. Led a pretty active lifestyle, I suppose, as far as enjoying the outdoors and travel and gardening and all kinds of different things. But I can remember, again, interesting, was it perhaps right at the end of 2015? It's 2015 or 2016. Again, where I had what I would, I guess, have to label as the enlightenment or an enlightenment point in my life. 2015, 2016, personal growth and development, family, business, so many different things. But I had an influence. I had an inspiration from someone that I did not know well, but I met someone who was really health-minded, open to sharing their experience with me, open to answering my questions. And I can remember asking many, many questions from that individual that got me started on my own personal study thereafter of reading good books, listening to quality information, going into my kitchen cabinets and making some changes, committing to various times throughout the week, doing particular exercises, which eventually morphed into training. I have a differential there between training and exercise. I would say that I train now. And it was just a really big physical and mental, and probably some other areas, change for me. Because I had this outside influence, this inspiration, that was also a resource for some information, at least enough to get me started. And that's what I encourage folks to do, is implement this concept when you know you want to become your own banker. You'll grow and scale things, buy more policies, do more, go faster over time. Nash, through his life, talked about getting rid of the snakes and dragons as well, and that took a certain amount of time. Remember, the time's going to go by either way. So my point in mentioning this is I just know that I had that time in my life because even though I'd done lots of things before, at that point, I had fertile ground. I was open to the idea of learning more about my body, about health, about nutrition, about so many different things that I could have said, well, I know that. So many things that I could have said, well, I'm already doing that. But I just didn't know what I didn't know. And some things I thought I knew, they might have been misconceptions. Might have been an illusion of knowledge, much like what we've talked about. So with that being said, I hope that this has been helpful for you in looking at this particular human problem, the arrival syndrome. I hope that you've enjoyed getting in on this book review. If you would, let me know down in the comments section what your biggest takeaway or life experience where you're connecting the dots happens to be. And if it's a private conversation that you would like to have about your particular financial situation so you can know more about or figure out how to implement this infinite banking concept into your household or your business or your investing, then don't hesitate to reach out to me. And I do look forward to that conversation. This has been a great pleasure for me. Have a great day. Take care. We have arrived. Now, why does that look like that? Is that too much? I don't know. Hello and welcome to the Durham Talents channel. My name is Jesse Durham. I might have lost my train of thought exactly. There are so many layers to this. Be that as it may. That must be a saying I'm really enjoying today. I'm pretty sure I've said that 3 times already. And I haven't recently. I haven't very much. All the same.